Hello everyone, welcome to SportsCharcha. Hope everyone is safe and well. This episode is a tribute to what could never have been, the European Super League. A league that presented itself as a savior of the sport, but eventually was a rather expensive game of smokes and mirrors. But what do you expect from billionaire owners who care more about logos on their jerseys than the stars around their emblems? Who better to talk about this fiasco than an ancient hermit from Thane, aka Bala, and an uber stylish Bandra boy, aka me. We love our facts, but we never let it come in the way of a good story. By the time you hear this episode, the European Super League would most probably be dead, apart from continuing to be Fiorentino Perez's wet dream. But screw it, here we are, and you have to listen to it. Hi, I'm Eeshaan. Welcome back. We have Bala here, who's had a tumultuous week, losing the Classico, then winning a trophy. So, congratulations, Bala. But so much has happened in the last week in football. It's almost like a little ridiculous. It doesn't even happen in career mode in FIFA. So many dramatic moves. And lots to talk about. But let's get straight into it. The most important thing that is that's creating waves around the world, the creation of the European Super League. So Bala, just before we get into the meat of this, what are your initial thoughts about it?
I wasn't surprised, but it is very interesting to know where these numbers are coming from, why the clubs have taken this decision. First reaction was obviously very disappointing to see that teams try to take advantage of their legacy and say that, hey, we have won this competition so many times, so we want permanent membership, we want permanent money or
residency.
Yeah, permanent residency all the time. It felt disappointing at that time, but then when you start listening to more and more arguments, when you start reading more and more perspectives, you try to see where these clubs are coming from. At many level, I understand their point of view, but you cannot ignore the other emotional and passionate point of view from your football fans. It's a classic case of capitalism versus democracy.
I was just going to say that. I think you're bang on about that because while a lot of if you read on Twitter and sports pundits, they're going completely against it. But I think you also, as you rightly pointed out, need to understand where these big clubs are also coming from. It is a fact that all these big clubs contribute the majority of the funds and financials, commercials for a European Champions League or in European football in general, right? Media, everything around media revolves around them. So why don't they get a greater piece of the pie when it comes down to funds being distributed back to them by UEFA or whoever? So that is a fair point. Big clubs have been hit far worse in COVID than the smaller clubs because they rely on ticket sales, commercial merchandise, which cannot happen right now due to no fans being there in stadiums. So there are a lot of these subliminal aspects that the big clubs need to look at, and that have caused them a lot of financial stress. Yes, a lot of them have managed their clubs really poorly that to reach this level. If you take, I've been reading about Bayern Munich, right? They're such a well-managed club that they can even afford not to be part of this and still be sustainable. And that is all. They've always been the best case practice in managing a club, right? And Dortmund are the same. They're partly managed by the people, partly have ownership as well. I want to ask you one question, I understand why the Premier League clubs took this step because a lot of it is around money, but there's a lot of it around, there are big name clubs. They are worth a lot of money, but they're not in Europe. For example, if you look at Tottenham and Arsenal, right? They are in the top 10 richest clubs in the world, but they are not consistent in Europe. They're probably not even there. So I understand their perspective. Their costs far outweigh the rewards they reap. I understand their perspective. But what intrigued me was about clubs in Italy and clubs in Spain. I understand Barcelona. They are in a financial struggle. They need that influx of capital, but they're also managed partly by the people. Why do you think that? And they're also driven greatly by fans. If you look at the Catalonia fans of Barcelona, you look at, the Madridistas for Real Madrid, the Nerazzurris for Inter Milan. Those are hardcore, ultra level fans. Why would they do this to them? Why do you think so?
It's very interesting you brought in three different stages in where the clubs are, especially the three countries we're discussing about: England, Spain, and Italy. Like, before getting deep into it, let's just give a very brief idea for listeners who don't know much about what the Super League is and why it happens, so on and so forth. So we'll just quickly run through the facts, quickly run through what has happened. To start with, this European Super League has been in discussions more than last 2.5 years, if I'm not wrong. Easily around 2.5 years, this has been in the discussion that the big clubs in Europe, especially driven by Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus. These are the three clubs who drove this with help from Liverpool and Manchester United. So these are the five clubs who were actually driving this right from the beginning.
Founding members.
Yeah, you can call the founding members. These five clubs were driving this entire project because they were simply not happy with how UEFA is functioning, how UEFA is handling things, especially with respect to Champions League. So they wanted to break away for a while. Now, what has happened over the last 1 year is this COVID has given them a greater reason to take the next big step, to have proof that, hey, your model is not working, because in your model, because of this issue, we are not making money. Now, we have a simple other outlet to go, so we'll go there. Now, what these clubs did is they again sent out feelers to all the other bigger clubs in and around Europe. It's a 20 club championship, where you have your 15...
18 for
No,
now.
the last one I read was 20. So it was 20,
20.
where you have 15 clubs who will have the legacy status, which means those 15 clubs will always be there. Then you will have these 5 clubs who keeps rotating into relegation and promotion. And what they have been promised is consistent cash flow from this
Also,
league.
Bala, just to add, I think for people who are listening to us and probably don't know what the hell we're talking about, this is, in a layman's term, this is almost like creation of a parallel league, almost like an NBA or a baseball, where there are a fixed number of teams who won't change, and they will play against each other. Winner of that wins the European Super League, but the money remains within those set of clubs. It does not go out. It does not get shared with other clubs. So it becomes their own bubble of sorts. So that's the model they want to work on.
It's like an Amiro ka ICL, bro.
No, it's also very interesting that you gave 2 specific sports as example.
Yes.
After discussing Europe, after discussing England, Spain, and Italy, we'll have to discuss America also, because America plays a major role in this entire
Huge role,
thing,
yeah.
because this is their system, this is how they work. Your NFL, as you rightly pointed out, NBA, all work within this model, where you have a set of 20 teams, and
Yeah.
that 20 teams will play all the time, and they'll get the share.
Yeah.
Before getting too deep into that, that's a very interesting perspective to look into.
That's another podcast, because how everything regarding transfers will have to change, contracts will have to change if they want to fit into their small universe. But we have another detailed podcast for that as well.
Exactly the reason why I have been like equally fascinated and worried at the same time over the last 48 hours. This is what we think the Super League is and what we have read so far. So you have these. So right now, out of those 15 clubs we discussed, 12 have signed a letter of intent. They have officially agreed to join. This includes your 6 clubs from England: Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, Man City. Then 3 clubs from Spain: Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid. 3 clubs from Italy: Juventus, Inter Milan, and AC Milan. Now there are clubs who were supposed to sign but haven't signed, believed to be PSG, Bayern, and there have been talks going on with clubs like Benfica, Dortmund, Porto, all these Plan B clubs. The Plan A clubs don't work out, these are the Plan B clubs.
Yeah.
Now, as on today, we are recording on 20th April, this is around 10:20 a.m. As on today, Bayern have come out and publicly said that we are not going to be a part of this. PSG haven't made any public statement yet. Pretty much every German club has come out and said that we are not signing this, including clubs like RB Leipzig, who is the eternal bad boy
Yeah.
of Bundesliga. So even they have come out and said that they are against this. So this is how the status right now. Now let's talk about who all are going to get affected by this. Now there is this whole bunch of stakeholders who are going to get affected by this. First you have fans. Then you have other clubs who are playing in the same league. You have sports administrators, which includes your UEFA, FIFA, includes the administrators of ESL. The clubs, the 12 participating clubs in itself, what's going to happen to them? And more, and individual countries' leagues, individual
Yeah.
countries' football associations. And most importantly, on top of all this, governments are getting involved in this. Yes, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson came out and publicly said that we'll do whatever we can do to stop this. Their cultural minister Oliver Dowden made a statement today or yesterday in Parliament about this. He said we will allow UEFA to sort this out. If they don't sort this out, we will enter. We will interfere. We will make sure we'll do whatever we can within our powers to stop this. Prince William have come out and spoke about this. This has absolutely exploded England top to bottom because they, as a fan, as a country who created this game, who invented this game, and it's their national sport also. What they feel is that their values have been stolen for greed, for money. That is their point of view.
But I have a contrary thing to that, right? Football started as an elitist sport like any other sport created by the Brits.
No, actually wrong. Football is actually the workman sport. The elitist sport in England at that point of time was cricket. I mean, cricket is too elitist. You know the concept of hat trick, right? I mean, I'm
No.
slightly digressing, but it's a very interesting trivia. The concept of hat trick is when a bowler bowls and he takes 3 wickets, next ball, it's a great trick. So what the bowler does is he takes out his hat and goes and begs money. Takes money from the crowd around him. The reason is, in those days, when cricket was being played in the mid 1800s, late 1800s, it's the lords who used to bat. Your lords you used to bat, and the bowlers are basically your servants and slaves. So the slaves and the servants used to bowl, and when they take 3 wickets, the watchers, the viewers who are again lords and all these rich guys will tip them. These guys have to take out their hat and do this. That's called hat trick.
Wow.
So when we say hat trick, we are actually reliving a very sad moment in the human history.
Fun fact brought to you by Bala.
Going back to the point that football is a workman sport. The game itself is very harsh, very rowdy, and all that thing. So it's the working class people. It's a perfect blue collar game that was invented. In fact, that is another point that keeps coming out is that this game was invented by the poor but taken away by the rich. That's where the government is coming from. Now let's look at each clubs. Now let's talk about the founding members itself. Because we should not ignore them. We can't just go out and say that these are 12 absolutely evil people with horns and tails and coming out and doing bad things to everyone around them.
Also, before we get into that, I just wanted to point out, I was reading, the reason why PSG is a little muted right now is that Khalifi, who is their CEO and boss, basically is on the advisory board of UEFA. But over and above that, he is the CEO of beIN Sports, which is the exclusive media partner of the Champions League. So at this very moment, he cannot do very much. I'm pretty sure there will be if this league goes ahead, you cannot have it without PSG. Paris is where the money is at in a way. So that will happen. But for listeners who do not know, I probably are confused as to why a club like PSG are not saying anything. This could be one of the major reasons.
That's a very important point to bring in. I mean, that is the reason why PSG are holding on to this because they have their own personal interest.
Yeah, I wanted to separate that from, say, a Bayern's angle because there are two very different angles, and Bayern deserves the plaudits they get for this. Whoever is not on the Super League side, so they deserve that. I don't want to bucket them with PSG, so I just wanted that.
Yeah, coming back to the point why these 12 clubs did it. The English clubs, the top English clubs released their financial statements, and according to that, They lost a total of about 1.3 billion pounds or 1.3 billion euros across the 2019-20 season. Their
Okay.
combined loss was about $1.3 billion, and this is without Liverpool's financial statements still being out. So it's only going to add to it.
But 1920 seasons, only in the latter half were there no fans, right?
Exactly the my follow-up point. Especially this being the fact that that season only had last 3 months of games taken away.
Okay.
So even then they had a massive fallout of 1.5 billion accumulated in total. So that is one of the main reasons why clubs were actually very scared that they might have to close down. So they took this massive step. Now, what this ensures, as we pointed out earlier, is a financial stability. It makes sure that these clubs get a consistent flow of fund irrespective of their on-field performance. So what happens for a big club like, let's say, Liverpool or Manchester United? Okay, Manchester United, it's not a great example here because they generate a lot of money. In fact, they are the only club right now in that 1920 season who posted profits.
Yeah. But not because of their football, right? That's because of the brand they are.
It's because their brand they are, but the point is they can invest that money in the football. Now the brand got developed because of football in the first place.
Yeah.
Glazers use Manchester United as a siphoning, as a personal ATM.
Yeah.
It's a known fact. There is no surprise there. Now, this is where these owners came from. They said like, hey, we need to make 2-year, 3-year plans. When we make 2-year, 3-year plans, when we plan our next big purchase, when we plan our next big stadium, when we plan our next big investment, we need to have a certain level of assurance in terms of whether we are going to get consistent flow of money over a period of time. Now, when something like COVID or something like this happens, our one source of income is completely blocked. Clubs make somewhere about 15 to 20% through ticket sales, through hospitality, stadium hospitality and everything. So that 20% is gone. There is a big hole in that 20%. So they want to fill that 20% with this money. That these clubs would have expected this amount of backlash. It will be a little ridiculous to think that they'll be surprised to see, oh my god, people are so against it. It's a great idea. I mean, they know that there's going to be backlash. So how are they going to handle this backlash? I was reading this interview by Florentino Perez. Perez is the new chairman of this European Super League. Florentino Perez is the president of Real Madrid. We talked about English clubs. Now, since we are segueing into Real Madrid, let's talk about the Spanish clubs, how they function. Now, all these 6 English clubs are owned by some owners or a group of owners. Like, say, for example, in case of United, they are owned by this American billionaire family called Glazers. Liverpool is owned by Fenway Sports Group. Fenway Sports Group is the one who runs, I think, Boston Red Sox. Boston Red Sox is their team. And they have one more team and they run Liverpool also. Then you have Arsenal run by Stan Kroenke, who is an American billionaire. Chelsea run by Abramovich, who is a Russian billionaire. Man City run by the entire United Arab Emirates country. And Tottenham, we don't know who runs it. No one knows who runs Tottenham. It's a different case altogether. But the point to note is 5 out of the 6 owners are not from England or not from the western part of Europe.
Very interesting point.
Then let's go to Spain. The 3 Spanish clubs, Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid and Barcelona. Now, Real Madrid and Barcelona are very uniquely owned clubs. Now, Florentino Perez, who is the president of Real Madrid, and Joan Laporta, who is the latest president of Barcelona, these people don't own the club. Let's make it very clear, they don't own the club. What they do is they run the club, but they don't own the club. The clubs are actually owned by a group of fans. Real Madrid is owned by a big group of fans. Same way Barcelona are owned by a big group of fans. Let's call them members, permanent members of the club. So any major decision will always be taken by these group of members through voting. Now, there is a slight difference between the administrative points of how Real Madrid and Barcelona operate. Let's don't go too deep into it. That's not our aim here.
Yeah.
But ultimately the idea is this is not a one person's decision. Now, even if it's a one person's decision, it has to come with certain level of consensus from that members, from their individual members. Now we haven't seen any major reaction from either the Madristas or the Coolers. I think they're called Coolers. I don't know what they're called. The Barcelona.
Kool-Aid's.
So
Kool-Aid's.
whatever, Kool-Aids or whatever, whosoever the Barcelona board members are, and same way the core Real Madrid members are. So we haven't got anything from them. But what we know is Florentino Perez have come out and given a massive interview, like a very detailed interview where he goes on about how UEFA is being very badly handled, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to break away. And they have been telling UEFA for a very long time to get their act together. So it's their way of protesting, it's their way of saying that we don't want you guys, we don't want to be with you anymore, we want to go out. But he still wants to stick to the one point that this is better for football. This is better for football. He's kind of keep harping on that same point that this is not something anti-football, which is how it's being generally perceived by the other sections of the society. But what he wants to come out and say that this is not against football. This is merely to show that all these clubs are in a very great financial distress. And this is the best way out for the clubs and in turn for the football pyramid also. It's a valid point. I'm not going to contest it.
I completely agree with what you said, but I have an issue with the fundamentals of the clubs being selected for this, the Super League, because is it based on merit or is it based on financials? Because if you look at merit, right, the big clubs of Spain, apart from Real Madrid and Barcelona, the third most successful club in Spanish history is Athletic Bilbao, right? It's not Atletico Madrid. Atletico Madrid, on a societal level, the reason they have fans is because they're a workman's club. That's why they hate Real Madrid, who's always been the white collar, the royal club, because it's the rich versus poor. Now, them being a part of this elitist Super League group makes them on par at one level, at least in terms of perception, with Real Madrid, right? They're not different, right? When you look at financial, like what are these clubs going to contribute, in terms of return, in terms of money, AC Milan and Inter Milan aren't what they used to be financially. If you look at the Forbes list right now, you have a West Ham, Everton being on par with an AC Milan and Inter Milan in terms of revenues. So you can't just say it's on the big club success, because if you're looking at revenue, then why aren't you actually taking the clubs that actually make the revenue, which are the smaller clubs, right? Now, I understand, coming back to just what your point is, and I think I'm open to everyone who's going to be listening to this podcast to help me understand what was the selection process. You guys might know what I don't, right? Now, when it comes to what Perez said about it being better for football, right? It is almost a very American perspective, and I know where that came from because of the Glazers, everyone. It's the perspective that everyone watches us. If we don't exist in the sport, nobody, the sport doesn't exist. It's basically the ostrich scenario, right? Like the world exists just around my horizon, it doesn't exist beyond it. Uh, it deeply impacts everything to do with football because, everyone, for example, if this league goes through, everyone will be, all TV rights will go to this. Obviously, because who would not want to watch a Real Madrid Barcelona every alternate week? I have another take on that, which I'll get to, but I'm saying who will watch the smaller clubs, right? What will happen to them? They will go into complete irrelevance. And those are the majority of the world supports the smaller clubs when you look at it in pockets. If you look at England, right? The hardcore fans are not always Anfield, Old Trafford, Stamford Bridge, Emirates. They are the Leeds United, they are the West Hams, Evertons, they are, even say Stoke City, Sunderland. So what will happen to those clubs? So that's why I understand where you said, government's coming, because this breaks, fractures a lot of things at a very societal level in terms of perceptions of how societies run. Do the rich continue being encouraged to get richer just because they believe that they have eyeballs? Or can a better solution be found? I still believe there is a solution that I feel this is a card the big clubs have played with UEFA to say, this is our threat. What are you going to do about it? I still feel that that's the way they are playing it. And that's the way it's always going to be, because they're lucky fans are not watching these games. Because if yesterday, for example, Leeds United versus Liverpool had fans and it was at home, right? I cannot imagine what the reaction would have been. I would think that the Liverpool fans would probably support Leeds in protest. You will never walk alone. You're just completely changing the entire fundamental values of your club by doing this. And that is my core issue. I completely understand the capitalistic perspective about big clubs, having a lot of strain financially and wanting to do this. But football is an emotional sport and both of us love it because of the emotions involved, not because of the money involved, because we could do with some of the money, but we don't have any, right? uh, we just have the emotion. Now if you're taking away emotion, what would both of us do if Barcelona and Real Madrid play each other every alternate week? It won't be the Clasico that it is right now, where they play twice a year and hopefully sometimes in the Champions League, where the stakes are way higher. A Clasico will have no merit when the Clasico will happen again in 2 weeks or in the next year, because they didn't work out this way. It just, there's nothing at stake. They're still going to be in the league. So there's a lot of these softer issues that need resolving or we need clarity on, which is not happening. Everything is just being played on social media or by the media at a very high macroscopic level. We need to understand how this will affect everything. And as you said, we need a proper separate podcast just to get into every minutia about it.
Since you've talked about this, who's going to watch these games? Who's going to watch any other sport other than any other event other than at the El Clasico that's happening? Now that brings us to the most important stakeholder of this entire thing, which is the fans, because they are the ones who are going to determine the success or failure of this entire operation.
Yeah.
Now, it is very, very clear that the clubs who have decided to start European Super League, or let's talk about not the clubs, let's talk about JP Morgan. So they are going to fund this. They are going to give about $6 billion,
Yeah.
and they are going to initially spend about 4 billion euros distributed across these 12 clubs as joining bonus or something like that. Okay. Now the question is, how are they going to generate that amount of money? Now, if you quickly see, Champions League generates about 200 to 250 million dollars. Sorry, million. I keep saying dollars. Million euros per season, I believe. I'll confirm the numbers. But on the top of my head, this is how they make. Now, Real Madrid in this season, according to what their performance in this season, they could bag somewhere about 100 million euros out of Champions League alone this time. Now, they are one of the semi-finalists. They are going to bag about 100 million euros. Now, Real Madrid's point is, we are semi-finalists. We need more than 100 million euros. If they do the same performance in a European Super League, we'll get 200 million euros. Why they think they get 200 million euros? Because they are sure that their fans, their millions of fans around the world, will watch their games. Now, it also gives these clubs opportunities to sell their image rights, their TV rights by themselves. So what you and I can do is that I can enroll myself, I can sign up myself for a Barca TV for, let's say, $1 a month or $10 a year, and I get to watch some 15 games on their YouTube channel.
Yeah, in subscriptions.
Now imagine the amount of fans that Real Madrid and Barcelona, clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona have across the world. So what they are losing on stadium going fans, they are going to earn double with social media, with fans in subscriptions. So it works brilliantly as a revenue model. So they really don't care about the local fans.
Yeah.
So the local fans are the ones who are extremely affected.
Yeah.
Especially in Europe, especially in places like England, even in Spain, even in Germany, Italy. These clubs have been around for more than a century. Yeah? Like people associate their family, generations associate themselves with the club. Most of their happiest things in their memories, in their family, in their lives have been around these football clubs, in and around the football clubs or the successes of the football clubs. So you're taking that away from them.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are what? Like, you're sitting in Bandra, I am sitting in Thane. Hum dono kya matlab lukka people. We don't care much. But I'm talking about the fans who live their lives, whose parents live their lives, whose grandparents live their lives around these clubs.
And I think both of us have seen the loyalty, right? We've been to those cities. We've seen those games, right? We've seen like every small cafe. you know which club they are attributed, their fans, the owner is belongs to, because there'll be flags, there'll be pictures on the wall. And if you're in Barcelona, you see almost every cafe has the Barcelona flag or the Catalonian flag or the Barcelona logo or a Messi jersey or something like that. It's those guys that are affected. Yes, the two clubs, say for example, if you give Real Madrid and Barcelona as an example, if you go to the matches, right? If it's a normal league game, about 80% of their fans are tourists, right? And that is the crowd they are appealing to, as you rightly pointed out, in the subscription or the direct to customer model that they are planning, or what they would plan to have through the Super League. Because the big games, it will generally go to season ticket holders, so it's lesser scope for tourists to be there. But smaller games on a midweek, you are generally going to look at all the guys who are in Madrid or in Barcelona and on a holiday, and they're like, "Arey, sasta mein ticket mila, let's go and watch." And that's majority. Like when I went for a useless Madrid game, it was I didn't see any ultras. They were just tourists, right? Uh, but when I went to Inter Milan versus Barcelona at the Camp Nou, or Atletico Madrid versus Real Madrid at the call, there were only ultras. They were like hardcore loyal fans watching those games. And what they are trying to do with this model, as you absolutely correctly pointed out, is that they're taking care of both. For the ultras and the loyalists, they will have these big games every week. But for people who do not have access to watch these big games, like tourists who represent 80% of their normal ticket day, they will also get to watch these big games similarly with the loyalists through these subscription models. So it's basically everyone has access to a big game all the time, instead of it being split in terms of big game, small game, and the type of fans that attend. So, that's a very good point you made. It made me think about this. And, that's going to be a very interesting thing, because the world will go, football will have to go digital if it wants to monetize this. But then you're looking at the big fan bases. You have the Real Madrid, Barcelona, United, for example. But what happens to, say an Arsenal or a Tottenham who don't have a problem? Arsenal do. Tottenham, who do not probably have such a global reach. Meaning what will happen to it's still going to be a stage where these elite clubs, there will be clubs that will lag behind in that elite league as well. It's a lot of risk, right? Like a club like Barcelona, Real Madrid, they're risking a lot of their prestige by joining a league like this, because who knows, they might finish bottom.
That goes to show how much fucked up they are financially, because they are in absolute doldrums. Like Real Madrid started this stadium construction project, and they made tons of investment in the 1920s. Last season they didn't buy anything, which is an historic moment in itself in Real Madrid's history, in enhanced history, that where they didn't make any signing, in fact they ended up selling people rather than signing people. So all that came back to bite them. It's a well documented story how bad Barcelona has been run. No point in discussing that. Coming back to your point of Arsenal and Tottenham. Arsenal, as you rightly pointed out, have ton of fans. In fact, US, Arsenal and United are the two biggest clubs. Even in India, Arsenal and United must have the largest number of fans. I don't know the exact stats, but by perception, Arsenal and United will have the most number of fans. So that's why Arsenal got in.
Yeah.
Now, Tottenham got in because that they have reached a certain level of status when it comes to social media presence, when it comes to fans following. Now, this is where I am a little suspicious about Daniel Levy, what he has been doing over the last 2-3 years. First, the stadium. 2, he went and did a lot of partnership with NFL. If you remember, NFL came down to play a game at Spurs Stadium. NFL came down to play a game at Wembley when Spurs was playing in Wembley. So he was always having that tie-up with the American sporting giants like NFL and everything.
Yeah.
Third, that Amazon documentary, All or Nothing. There was no content at all.
It was random.
Yeah, all or nothing nahi hai. It's nothing. There is nothing. There is no all. It's nothing. There is no surprise there. and it ended up to be nothing. I mean, the whole fact that Mourinho got sacked, that no one's talking about him.
Yeah, but I think that's a smart move by Levy. They sacked him when they knew that it'll hurt Mourinho that nobody will talk about him.
A, that is that, and B, now they have a financial security, right? He wasn't firing Mourinho because he had to pay him a lot of money.
But that he has money if this happens. It's still not.
I'm pretty sure they must have given some assurance. Again, like going back to the same point that these guys must have planned this every step. There's some master professor sitting behind the scenes with the specs on, with some 10 screens in front of him, with the mics. He's mic'd up and talking to people and giving instructions. I can imagine someone.
The actual VAR.
Yeah, someone in a black suit.
The financial VAR.
Someone in a black suit, like holding his hands together like this and talking in a hushed tone. Coming back to fans. So I'm going to do that study. I'm going to see how these fans, viewers split up. I want to see how many are your core fans. How many are your fans that want to watch a football match? How many are tourist watchers? Watchers who watch with someone else. My friend is watching, so I'll also watch. So it'll be very interesting to study that and see what percentage of fans with who we expect will continue to watch this. You know, this will split the fans also into two. Now you're definitely going to have one set of fans who absolutely hate this European Super League. They'll start following other clubs in protest. Like you will see Liverpool fans following Everton in protest. You will suddenly see the increase in Everton's fan following. You'll suddenly see an increase in Leeds fan following. Suddenly see an increase in Leicester's fan following. So you will see that might happen. So there is a lot of money to be lost, to lose there. Number two is, how are they going to react to these player bans? Now, how are the fans going to react to these player bans? How are the players going to react to these player bans? In fact, we completely forgot about the players, the freaking players, who is ultimately going to end up playing these games.
A lot of extremities have been thrown across by UEFA as well, because UEFA, not too many people are sympathizing with UEFA in this. They're against the Super League, but not because poor UEFA or poor FIFA. It's about the poor fans. Let's get that very clear. Nobody is sympathizing. UEFA have mismanaged a lot, and FIFA as well. They play the money game as well. To give you an example, when the Valencia game happened, there was a racism issue. They should have come down hard on that issue. But when money was in the picture, where about, the Super League being formed, etc., they are making public statements on a daily basis. When the Super League was formed, the founders or all the members had no intention of separating from the leagues or separating from the domestic competitions or international. It's similar to literally जब 10 साल पहले ISL बना था. ISL, when they started, they had no intention that if you're in ISL, they won't get a BCCI contract. Right? That was not the plan. But that's how BCCI/UEFA react. Right? Because they are also the money ballers, right? They are exactly in a way the same. BCCI said, if you are playing on ICL, you'll never play for India again.
ICL. I think you meant ICL.
Sorry, ICL. Sorry, not ISL. ICL. My bad. UEFA and FIFA are threatening similar actions, but actually getting that to work is a different story, because the club has made a decision that they're doing the Super League. The players are already in the club, so ideally, if they want to actually act on it, it will become players coming into the club post this going live should be banned. I mean, what is Luka Modric's fault of not playing for Croatia? He's been in Madrid for 9 years, and Real Madrid have taken this step. How is that his fault or whatever? So the players should not suffer. And I don't think they will. That will actually impact fans, because you cannot have a Croatia, the fans of Croatia being okay with their captain not playing. And I'm just using Modric as an example, but think of the likes of De Bruyne of the world not playing for Belgium.
Ronaldo not playing for Portugal.
Ronaldo. That's you're going into as you said, governments will have to get involved, because then that is demeaning the prestige of the entire country only.
So this is where my next point is on how these people are going to encounter this. Now, my question is, didn't they expect this level of reaction. I don't know whether they expected governments to react. I expect they would have expected fans to react. They would have expected the respective leagues to react, the respective FAs to react, ex-players, pundits, they must have expected all this. But I'm not sure whether they expected the governments will react. Now, again, as you rightly pointed out, ESL's aim is not to break away from the domestic competition. Their aim is to only break away from Champions League. Their proposal of ESL is we are not going to break away from the domestic leagues. We are going to only play ESL instead of Champions League. In fact, they came on top of it and said that we are okay with Champions League also being run parallelly. We are not even against that. We just want another competition for ourselves. If you are banning from Champions League, okay, well and good. We'll play only ESL. Now, this was one report I was going through yesterday on Sky Sports ka channel. Their reporter has mentioned that he spoke to one of the board members of the top 6 English clubs who agreed to this. He didn't mention the name of the club, name of the person. What he said that person quoted was that they don't care if they get removed from the domestic league. In fact, they would prefer them getting removed from one of the leagues so that it gives them more time to play ESL. They won't mind if the players get banned from international competitions because again it will help the players to play only this league. These are very disappointing to see at one end, how deep they have gone into this. They are being very open about it. Yeah, we are doing this. You calling it bad, you are calling it evil, whatever it is, we are doing this. So these guys knew exactly what they are doing. Now, interesting to see how they are going to handle this international ban. And especially with international ban being in place, you're not going to get superstars. Many superstars won't prefer playing. Now, when you don't have superstars, who's going to watch the game? They're absolutely not after European markets. This is Asian and American markets, Chinese market, Indian market, American market. These are the markets they are after. And these markets rely on superstars. There's a very simple reason why a lot of clubs follow Real Madrid, a lot of fans follow Real Madrid and Barcelona. Yeah, very simple. It's Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi. It's extremely simple.
It started with Beckham.
Exactly.
Beckham was primarily bought for commercial reason. It just turns out that he was a great footballer as well. And that's where Real Madrid's Asian market skyrocketed. It overtook United because United was number one because of Beckham. And then when we got Beckham, the Korean markets, everything, it became Real Madrid. And similarly with when Ronaldo and Messi, they go to China, Japan to play these preseason games. And that's where the most of the revenue happens. And also, another good point is preseason didn't happen. That's also a good amount of revenue they've missed out on in the last couple of years. And, it brings me back to the Champions Cup that happened in the US, right? I think that was the breeding child of the European Super League because at that time, it had the big clubs playing against each other in different batches and then they face the final together, even if you lose. I think that was the first. I'm just thinking these big clubs might have thought, this could actually work because the stadiums, like NFL stadiums, were being packed with fans to see the big names. And they thought that, this is a model that can actually be expanded into.
Since you brought that topic, very interesting point, the Champions Cup. Now, let me give you an example. We have seen Real Madrid and Barcelona playing a lot of preseason games. We have seen Madrid derbies, we have seen Clásicos, we have seen Manchester United, Real Madrid playing, Manchester United, Liverpool playing preseason games in US. Have we bothered to watch the game? I have never bothered to watch those games. Irrespective of the fact that those games will have Messi, those games will have Ronaldo, those games will have your Ibrahimovic and all your Wayne Rooney's and everyone, still haven't bothered to watch those games. Now that poses me as a fan another question: will I watch a Real Madrid and Barcelona in European Super League, or will I consider that European Super League as an International Champions Cup game and won't watch? Have these European Super League clubs accounted for that? Did they think that any Real Madrid Barcelona match will generate me viewership? I'm going to make money.
It will for the first couple of years, and then it'll just get. It's not a sustainable model, as you said, right? For the first year, it'll be like, wow, the first time, in an ESL, the Clásico, whatever, you can sell that. But how do you sell it in year 2? How do you sell it in year 3, year 4, right?
I'm not even worried about year 2, year 3. I'm worried about month 2, month 3. Like last month only Real Madrid Barcelona खेला यार अभी इस month भी क्यों अभी next month भी क्यों
Yeah, because if you're following an NBA format, right, in a division, you're playing each other at least 7 to 8 times. There are home series, away series. If you're looking at the baseball side, like each division will play each other 34 times. Although there are 164 games in a season, but they play each other 34 times. If they're following American models, the rivalries will go away, right? NBA does not have rivalries in terms of, so to speak. They have rivalries in terms of championships. If you see Lakers versus Celtics, it's like because they are number 1 and 2 in terms of number of titles. But there's no New York Knicks and Brooklyn Nets rivalry. Like that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist a specific. So that will be I think that, as you rightly pointed, I don't think they've factored in it. They're so desperate. They're looking at the utopian business outcome of this process. So I think that's where I think I completely agree with you. I think we've covered majority of the points that everyone is probably interested. But I think there's one facet of listeners that we hope to have, other fans of clubs who are not in this Super League. The clubs like then those are big clubs by resume as well as fan following. If you look at the clubs like Napoli, Roma, Sevilla, Valencia, these are really big historical clubs that are not going to be a part of this league. They might be part of the 5 clubs that keep going in and out, but as of now, in the unreplaceables, they are not there. So I want to know, Bala, what your thoughts are on how this would impact clubs like them, financially as well as in terms of viewership, etc.
financially, it will be a big hole in their pocket because most of these clubs entirely depend on the TV money that they get out of playing the league. Now, this TV money gets generated because that these countries have these big clubs, like Spain have these Real Madrid, Barcelona, English clubs have these big clubs, so on and so forth. Now, to give you an example, an average English club makes about 100 million to 125 to 130 million euros or pounds per season purely out of TV money. Now imagine this 125 130 million euros amount getting cut by half or more than half. Now that's a massive chunk in your revenue stream.
Yeah.
So these clubs are going to get affected by that. However, there is another revenue stream that's going to open out of this, which is again going to tie us back to the concept of players of these clubs. Now, these European super clubs obviously are going to fall short of superstars at some point of time, because none of these players playing for these clubs have contract for eternity. They'll maximum have another 2 or 3 years of contract left. Now, what's going to happen to that? Point number 1. Point number 2, they are eventually going to run out of players. Like Ronaldo and Messi are not going to continue playing for the next 5 years. They'll probably retire, or God knows what's going to happen to them. So they need to create a pool of players, pool of superstars coming into the league. Now, where are they going to go for those superstars?
And also, I think another point, to add to that, because they have alienated these smaller clubs are the general populace for breeding the talent. Ronaldo came out of Sporting Lisbon. If they completely alienate clubs like that, the next superstar will not be able to join the Super League.
Exactly my point. So what's going to happen? Now, they'll have to go to your Sevilla, they'll have to go to your Leicester, they'll have to go to Dortmund to buy players. Now, are these clubs, A, are they going to sell those players? B, are the respective countries' football associations going to allow them to sell those players? Third and most important point, if they sell, are they going to charge the same price they are charging right now? They'll eventually going to add a zero to the number. Okay, you have 260 million. Okay, pay me 100 million. Pay me 200 million. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these clubs are going to handle it in a financial way. Let's take the emotions out of it. How they are going to handle this financially. Now that's again poses a question to these super clubs. How are they going to spend the money? They are going to get 250, 260, $300 million, whatever. Now, if they are going to spend a bulk of that money again on player purchase, again on player
You're going down the
contracts,
same rabbit hole.
exactly, you're doing the same mistake again and again. So this is why I have a very strong feeling that this may not be a success. This will really endanger these clubs' reputation a lot.
I think the core of this was created also when the financial fair play system was built, where the big clubs were completely against it. It was basically to protect the mid level to small clubs to have some kind of standing when competing with these bigger clubs, because the fair play system was built upon you can only spend an X amount if you earn an X amount. A lot of clubs, if you without the fair play, would basically go all out, like say, and they still have unsustainably. If you look at Barcelona, right, they bought unsustainably. They could not sustain the type of players at the salaries they got for the long term. They had to let go, but undervalue. Currently, a Haaland would cost you 100 million when you can't afford 100 million. When you are worth 250 million more, they will charge 200 million. So you're back at square one. So everything will balance itself out in a way where the actual merit of creating a separate league does not exist anymore. That's where I feel that they've not thought this through completely. They have been taking a lot of assumptions and assuming these assumptions would go their way.
Yeah, true.
Players will be able to play for their country, the leagues will be okay with it, the leagues will be okay, or the clubs will be okay to let go of their superstars to these bigger clubs, because who would want to play in the Super League? This will actually be good for football. So it's taking a lot of assumptions and assuming that these assumptions go their way. It does not work in the real world like that. Everything gets skewed against them because of them creating this system. What will happen to players who have to be thrown out of these clubs?
Exactly.
We are only talking about influx, but what about the people going out? Like a Griezmann, if he has to leave Barcelona, and assuming none of the other top 15 want to take him, what does he do with his career? So it's then you're again, as I said at the beginning, you're moving into contracts like the NBA, where there are 10-year contracts with multiple free agencies, veteran signings, etc. You're moving into those because that is the only way this model works.
Yeah.
Then you're completely alienating the entire world. And then what I agree with, then UEFA, then you can't do any of this. You can't play for your national club. You can't do it. Like, there doesn't exist a global NBA other than the Olympics where, the countries face each other. There are Euros, but there's no World Cup. There's FIBA. But who watches FIBA? So, and even in FIBA, none of the NBA players are generally playing for the United States. Only in the Olympics, they sometimes do. So it breaks a lot of pre-existing systems. What I feel is that UEFA and FIFA will have to rework their numbers and go back to these big clubs and say, okay, we worked out a better model where, yes, you will probably get a bigger piece of the pie, but that pie will have to be based on merit. It has to be based on merit. It cannot be otherwise. अपना ये इंडिया का एजुकेशन सिस्टम के रिजर्वेशन कोटा हो जाएगा.
Exactly. It is exactly like a reservation quota. Like we have a legacy, so we will always get that 15 positions we want.
Yeah.
So that's unfair
That's
competition.
a broken system, right? It's a broken system.
That's unfair competition. That's exactly one of the major points raised by many of the ex-players and your administrators. This brings us back to the question of why a big club like Bayern didn't go for it. Because many clubs, see, this was initially started by, as you pointed out, those 5-6 big clubs. And then the other clubs were asked to join. Like what I feel is Chelsea, Man City, Arsenal, Tottenham, Inter Milan, AC Milan, Atletico Madrid, all these clubs have joined because they just don't want to be left out.
Yeah.
They're like, neither, okay, I'll come there. I'm going to make more money. I really don't give a shit about this. I'll need more money, I'll come there. If tomorrow everyone makes a very strong statement, they'll come back here and play. So they are perfect. They may not be as involved as your Real Madrids and Barcelonas, but they are also there. But that's the point why we're trying to. The point that we're trying to bring is why Bayern Munich is not a part of this.
Yeah.
That's
The
because
defending champions of the
exactly,
Champions League.
exactly. And more importantly is the way how these German clubs run. So German clubs have this 51% stake for fans model. So every major German club, as per their country's regulation, the fans should own 51% or more of the club's stake. Only the remaining 49% or less is owned by the one who run the club. So that's why most of these clubs are very well run. First of all, they are financially much more stable, and fans have a lot of say in what they do. And that's why you see clubs like RB Leipzig, clubs like Hoffenheim, clubs like Wolfsburg, clubs like Bayern Leverkusen have been traditionally hated by a lot of hardcore German fans. You will see a lot of bizarre things happening around the Leipzig game. I mean, not in the last 1.5 years with no fans, but if you remember that there was this head of a bull thrown on the field against, I think it was a game against Leipzig and Bayern. So these kind of things are very, very important for German fans. They're very vocal about it. They're very vocal about maintaining the integrity of the game. That's why German clubs have clearly said no. Because if there was a German club who had said yes to this, you will see a different reaction from German fans. So that's how these other clubs are. That's how we think the other clubs are going to react, and that's what is going to happen to the clubs who are not a part of this ESL. And obviously I can understand why they feel cheated also, because it's like saying मेरे पास बैट है, मेरे पास स्टंप्स है, मेरे पास बॉल है, तो मैं ही ओपनिंग खेलता हूँ.
But also if you look at it, all the big clubs, right, have in one way or the other been penalized by UEFA in their last 5-6 years. Transfer bans. If you look at financial fair play breaches, or signing younger players than they should, like how Barcelona was. City has forever been against UEFA to an extent where when the Champions League anthem plays, they still boo. So there are a lot of these aspects that they have been against or very vocal against UEFA, and they were always looking for a way to have a get the better of them one way or the other, right? And that is also one aspect. Like the moment they had the chance to say, screw you, UEFA, we have our another outlet, they took it. Meaning, while I agree that they were they're not as influential as say a Madrid or Barcelona, or a United. Like when they talk, people have to listen because they influence the game in a lot of ways. They are also these smaller, like not smaller, but the other clubs are also equally important in the dynamics of this league being created, because a city, for example, holds huge strategic value in the Middle East for these big clubs. You get a city and hopefully eventually a PSG, you control the Middle East in terms of commercials. That's a huge pile of money going away. I could not see if a city or a PSG, I'm just thinking out loud here, if they'd not been owned by the Middle East, I do not see a Qatar World Cup happening because the popularity won't exist. So there's a lot of importance given to the Middle Eastern regions as well. And that's why the Super League creation, they are actually very important pieces of the puzzle to join it. Because then FIFA and a lot of things go awry for FIFA, because that's where the oil is.
Yeah, see, FIFA again, since we are in the topic of, since we're discussing about administrators, football administrators, FIFA plays a very major role. I mean, they're shit. There is no hiding away from the
It's a
fact
known
that
fact they're shit.
it's a known fact they are shit. So, and their statement also, a very generic statement. They haven't come out and publicly said anything against it or for it. The subtext of their entire statement, which is 3 paragraphs long, is you guys are grown ups. Please sort it out amongst yourself. At the end of the day, we need money. Please make sure we get our money. So that is the subtext of FIFA's entire statement.
So what I'm also, as we near the end of this podcast, what I'm also worried about is that if this happens, who is stopping another separate league being created by other clubs?
Like a parallel league, a completely
Another
parallel.
parallel league.
Yeah.
Like who is stopping a Napoli, Roma, Sevilla, Valencia, Leeds, Leicester, saying, okay, they did it. We also own our own piece of the pie. Let's create our own league. And then it just goes on, because how do you stop them from saying, because you said you let these guys go, why can't we create our own and get our piece of the pie? And then it just goes on, and then you don't know, and then it just the viewership of the sport will drop for sure if everything is put in silos. And that's what I'm truly worried about, is the sustainability of the sport if this model is encouraged.
Another point which I was thinking is that they are trying to make this sport a commodity. So that is
Yeah.
not going well with a lot of passionate football fans. They don't want to see this as a commodity. They don't want to see this as a money making machine.
That's also delusional in a way by the loyal fans, because everyone knows it is a commodity in a way. Your fans are not getting their big new players without for free, right? On emotion. They're getting it on money. So while I understand the hardcore loyals being completely against it, but if say a Madrid or Barcelona does not have money, they're not getting a Mbappe or a Haaland. So in 5 years' time, they can't buy any big player. They're not going to be the Real Madrid or Barcelona. So people, want to kind of ignore those aspects and just say, "Oh, fans will suffer." So as I said in the beginning, that there is a point that these big clubs are making, and people have to listen to it. It's not that they are just saying, "Oh, we want to be rich, and we are rich now. We want to be richer." There is a perspective that we have to understand that they are making as well. And UEFA will have to figure their shit out, because if they don't figure out a solution, because the ball is in their court right now completely, whatever they say now will impact the sport. Like Seferin coming out and making these threats is not helping, right? It's not helping a solution. Yes, I agree that Agnelli, for example, did a lot of shady things in terms of saying one thing and doing the other. Woodward did the same, but we know this about Woodward for a while. United, ask you any United fan what they feel about Woodward. So it's a bit naive of Seferin to trust them. But still, I'm just saying it. The ball is in UEFA's court to figure this out. If they come out with a better model, definitely work on that 31 team model, which is a little ridiculous for me.
Which they have approved.
Which they've approved.
Which they approved yesterday.
Which they've approved. Then these big clubs will listen, because it's at the end, it's a business. It's going to be, if you're pleasing the business side of it, everything else falls in place.
The best thing for me to come out of this will be UEFA and FIFA getting in line. More assurance from UEFA and FIFA about football administration. Individual countries relooking the way they run football in their country, especially England, based on what I have seen over the last 2 days, coming out from football administrators, politicians in England, that they're going to have a serious relook at how the sport's being run in their country. Some of the reports that I saw, a couple of statements, not reports, stating that they are seriously considering the German way of running England football, giving control back to fans. That is something that will prevent these kind of things happening. And they're very serious about it. So, in a way, I see this announcement of European Super League not the best, but the most necessary shake-up that the entire football world needed at this point of time.
So on that note, I think we've written an extended essay or spoken an extended essay on this, but there's still so much to talk about. There's so many, but as the news unfolds, be assured that we will be making our notes and sharing what our thoughts about these are in our next podcast. We've actually not had the time this week to talk about any of the matches that happened in the Premier League or anything, because we both came to an agreement that this is what is moving the football world right now. So let's spend entire podcast on talking about it. So forgive us if it bored you, but I don't think it would.
That's it for today. Thank you everyone for listening to our take on the so-called European Super League. If you like what you heard, please share it with your fellow sports podcast listeners. And for more content, or even if you want us to discuss any other sports-related topic, please do reach out to us on Twitter at SportsCharcha. Bye-bye.